What's up, Geeks and Gamers? It's Odin coming back with a box office breakdown for this past weekend, which once again saw Barbenheimer take the number 1 and number 2 spots, with The Last Voyage of the Demeter not doing much of anything at the box office. That film, though not costing nearly as much as the other two movies I've just mentioned, is still costing enough to where a $6 million domestic start is just not going to be enough for it to be able to make its money back based off of the numbers that we currently have available to us. We all have some updated numbers here for TMNT, Mutant, Mayhem, and The Meg 2, and let's just say things aren't looking too great for either of those films, and I'll kind of explain why that is the case in just a few seconds. In fact, let's go ahead and dive into this first article from Tony over at Deadline, and of course we have to get this out of the way because Tony loves his headlines and loves to, sometimes I feel like he's almost trying to troll me in a lot of ways, but it says, Greta Gerwig breaks global and US box office records for female director with Barbie. And of course, that is going to be the major narrative surrounding this movie, is not only the fact that it is the female audience, specifically Gen Z and Gen Y, showing up in droves to go see this movie. Of course, other demographics as well, but most notably those two demographics, but also because this film happens to be a solo female film. And up until this point, the only big films, the only major releases as far as records are concerned, or the last ones that had any records, were really films that were helmed by both a female and a male director. Again, it is interesting also that someone like Tony is using language like that, which could be deemed as hateful and bigoted in today's world. Shame on you, Tony. Let's go ahead and dive into the numbers, though. Barbie from Warner Brothers making another $33.7 million. That's a 36% hold. So this film, 4 weeks out from initial release, is doing very well. And in fact, after 4 weeks, there has been no change or no major change at all in the number of theaters. It has the same over 4,000 screens, and that's even over films like Oppenheimer, even over newer films like TMNT and The Meg 2, and that is very, very impressive. Still rocking an $8,000 per theater ratio, getting to $526 million domestically. This film definitely on its way to getting well past $600 million, and I think that there's definitely now a conversation that can be had about whether this movie will be seeing enough domestic cash, enough domestic momentum to possibly even be able to catch a film like Top Gun Maverick. And I'll do a fuller breakdown over on OMB Reviews in addition to that, just to give you a little bit better idea. But let's just say right now, it's definitely a possibility with the kind of numbers that we are actually seeing. Oppenheimer came to the number 2 spot, making another $18.8 million. And as I mentioned last week, I did not think that TMNT or The Meg 2 was going to be able to have the kinds of holds it would need to keep being in that number 2 spot. And sure enough, Oppenheimer, as I predicted, did indeed come back into that spot. I didn't think that it necessarily would happen this quickly, but I'm also not all that surprised because look at Barbie and Oppenheimer. Look at the Barbenheimer effect. Both of them drop around the same amount almost every single week as far as the percentage is concerned. 36% drop for Barbie, 35% drop for Oppenheimer. So these films are clearly working very well together in theaters. In fact, Oppenheimer even added an additional 149 screens and still had a strong hold. So again, kudos to them for being able to do that and to take advantage of the online meme that has really just taken the world, especially of the box office, by storm. TMNT, though, did see a decent drop in its second week of release, a 44% drop. However, the film not making nearly as much money domestically or internationally is not necessarily in the best position as far as a break-even or even massive profit margin, and we'll break that down when we get into the actual charting itself. The Meg 2 in the number 4 spot, dropping 58% domestic, and I have to say that's definitely not a good place for it to be. It did not have the best opening domestically, but it also had again, not the steepest that we've ever seen drop off, but not nearly strong enough for it to be able to probably rock itself into profitability. And one of the main reasons why is because it has a huge China problem. When it comes to the Meg 2, not only is one of the co-producers a Chinese company, but also as far as how much money it's made worldwide, almost half of its entire box office has come from China alone. And if we know anything about China money, it is fool's gold because the vast majority of that money is going to be going to the Communist Party there. And so even though a Communist Party member as that production company is a part of it, some might say, oh, well, because they have a Chinese company there, maybe that will help them out. Again, not really. The Chinese Communist Party is always going to get its due. It's always going to get its money. And so let's just say right now it's not making enough money in the places it needs to, and it's making too much money in the place that it doesn't really matter all that much in the grand scheme of things. And then the last film to talk about in the top 5 this weekend is The Last Voyage of the Demeter, making a very low $6.5 million. I've heard some mixed things about it. Some have said, hey, it's actually a pretty fun time. Others who care a lot more about the lore and about the original source material. This is, of course, based off of some of the notes that are in the original Dracula novel. They have said that this movie changes a lot of things that it ultimately comes down to probably was done for some type of identity politics reason, as far as the characters that they add in who are not in the original book, and also some of the qualities of the people that are in the movie. There's also been some word also that there's some anti-Christian, anti-Catholic bias in the film too. I have not seen it, so I cannot confirm that, but it comes from people that I ultimately trust on a lot of things. But even with all that being the case, $6.5 million is not nearly enough to help this $45 million budgeted movie. Looking at the worldwide numbers, Barbie at $1.1 billion, so very, very close to 1.2 billion. I think at this point, we definitely could see the film getting somewhere between 1.3, 1.6 by the end of its run if these kinds of holds continue. For Oppenheimer, it's just gotten to the $650 million mark roughly. So I think that we're definitely looking at this film getting $700 to $800+ million at the box office by the end of its run. So again, kudos to them. A 3-hour drama making that much money is very impressive. TMNT Mutant Mayhem has only made $94.6 million as of the recording of this video, which means that, yeah, not breaking $100 million in the first 2 weeks. When you have a major IP as TMNT, to me, I think that is a sign that things are not looking all that great. The film only cost $70 million to make, so its break-even point is not nearly as high as some of the others, but unless it is going to open in other markets, and I've not double-checked to see exactly where this film still needs to be released in, but it's just not looking like there's going to be nearly enough cash for it to be, possibly one, could end up being a box office flop, or at the best case scenario, be a very small box office, profit maker. So in either case, you're not really happy with that as a studio. You want to be able to not only make your money back, but also make a decent return on your investment. When you are barely breaking even or making just a little bit of extra cash, usually that's not enough to continue that kind of franchise, but you never know. As we know, when it comes to Hollywood these days, they care more about the message than they do about money. So for all we know, we could absolutely be seeing more of these projects in the future. The Meg 2, as I mentioned, has a giant problem. Look at this discrepancy for one, right? $54 million domestic, $202 million internationally. This is what I was trying to say before. I don't think that the numbers has updated their international charting yet as far as the allocation to the different countries, but this is what the last numbers were for China, was around $70 million. Based on what we saw last weekend and what we can assume happened this weekend, I would not be surprised if that number is now upwards of close to over $100+ million in that market. And so that means that almost half of your entire box office is coming from one country, and it happens to be the country that you get the least amount of return on your money from. Remember, studios do not get 100% of the box office. And when you release a film in China, of all places, it's actually one of the worst deals out there. You only get about 25% of those box office receipts. And so, again, this movie might sound like it's doing better than what anyone expected on paper, but it's almost solely because it's doing very good numbers in China. And then we have The Last Voyage of the Demeter only making $6.5 million domestic, no international numbers to speak of at this point, but just based on everything that I'm seeing and based on the things that I've heard, I just don't see that being a possibility for this film. I'll do another fuller breakdown of more movies going into the top 10 and beyond on the video for my channel. Let's go ahead and jump into my chart, because we love charts here over at Geeks and Gamers. So first off, with The Last Voyage of the Demeter, because it costs around $45 million to make, the break-even point roughly is around 112.5. Some could argue even going upwards of maybe closer to 150. Again, depending on if you use a 2.5 multiplier versus a 3 times multiplier. At this point, though, we're looking at being around 63 million in the red. I don't suspect that by next weekend we're going to have that massive of a change with this, and so we likely can expect The Last Voyage of the Demeter to end up being a box office flop. The Meg 2, now that we have these numbers, right now I'm projecting the film to likely make somewhere between 26 and 114 million, but that is also using a typical split strategy, meaning you have the typical amount of money you would make domestically, the amount of money you would make internationally, and then the cuts you would get from those subsequent countries, and typically that would result in that kind of profit. But seeing that, again, half of the entire box office is coming from one country, and you get very bad returns, it means that the chances of the film actually breaking even probably aren't actually as strong as it might indicate here on this paper. So even if it does get to that 26 million or that $70 million mark, you're still looking at a movie that is likely going to still end up being a financial loss for them, especially since they have to split any revenues they do get with the Chinese company that they are co-producing the film with. So, again, not looking all that great for that film in any sense of the term. TMNT Mutant Mayhem, we can also make some projections on this. Right now, based on the numbers that we have at the first 2 weeks, we can project it's going to lose somewhere around $23 million at worst case scenario, with a best case scenario being 8.6. As I mentioned, even though the film does not have to make that much money to break even, 175 roughly as its break even point on a $70 million budget, because we are having these numbers as they are currently coming in, and because the film is not nearly as strong as what a film like this probably should, unless this film has amazing legs. Even if it does, though, again, that's what that 8.6 million, that would be if it doubles the amount of money it's made so far by the end of its run. Even if it doubles it, you're still looking at 8.6 million as far as any net gains are concerned. And remember that those are much more conservative estimates, meaning you probably will still end up seeing, even in that best case scenario. And again, obviously, when I say best case, I mean based on typical historical standards. So most films making between 50 and 70% of their entire box office in the first 2 weeks. There are exceptions to that. So the film overperforms going against history, which very well it could. Again, it has happened several times this year, in fact. Then we could see the film end up making a little bit more than that. But you're still looking at probably a best case scenario of it just, again, destroying the charts, making only a third of its entire box office, let's say, in the first 2 weeks of its release. That would still only bring it to maybe $20 million in profit or so. So again, not really looking all that great for that film. And if you want further box office breakdowns on any of the other films, right? So Barbie and Oppenheimer, of course, clearly adding to their overall profits. But if you want more, go check me out over at OMB Reviews. Make sure you smash that like button. Wherever it is that you're watching, smash it. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day, a blessed Sunday. And as always, God bless.